This is episode 726 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am joined this week by Bill Lee. He is president of the Gallup McKinley Chamber of Commerce. Bill and I have worked together on a number of issues in recent years, especially up in the legislature, and look forward to talking to Bill about what the issues are in Gallup and McKinley County, and just some of the things that he and his organization are working on and how he got to this position. But Bill, welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here and great to spend some time with you again, my friend.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think we got to know each other very first time working on right to work at the county level, probably 2018, 2019. Spent quite a bit of time, I did, out your way, testifying and working with members of your county commission at the time on that particular right to work issue. But been great allies ever since, and I enjoy working with you and seeing you around the Roundhouse or wherever we can meet up in New Mexico.
Yeah, it's always been good, and obviously we didn't win that fight back there in
Nope.
1819, but we sure stirred up the pot enough to where the legislature took action, I guess, to stop counties from ever thinking about trying to do that. But which is too bad. But we live to fight another day. We've been in several battles together, and I've always appreciated the Rio Grande Foundation's stand on many of the same issues that the Gallup McKinley County Chamber of Commerce has had. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you're definitely in a more blue part of the state, but you've been a staunch ally of freedom and small businesses since we've gotten to know each other. And I would qualify that as winning the battle but losing the war, because we did get it passed through your county commission there, but pretty soon after that, MLG got elected and scotched the whole thing, as you mentioned, with the legislature. But let's take a quick step back, and you have been involved in the Chamber of Commerce for a while, but how did you get into that particular role? What is your history with just Gallup in general? You living there and being from there, and talk about what made you eventually come to this point of heading up their chamber.
Well, I appreciate the time again, Paul. I was born and for the most part raised here in Gallup, New Mexico. My stepfather was in natural gas pipeline construction, so did spend a good portion of my early life bouncing around the country. In fact, changed schools 13 times in 1 year.
Oh man.
Yeah. So seen a lot of the country, been border to border and coast to coast. And the one fact remains that this is home. I love New Mexico, and I love my community. And probably all of that being said is what really led me to becoming the executive director and president here of the Gallup McKinley County Chamber of Commerce. Prior to doing chamber work, I spent 30 years in radio and television broadcasting, not only here in Gallup, but across the United States. And really enjoyed that career, but again, came home to Gallup to really work for the betterment of our community. And that's always been at the forefront of what we do here at the Chamber. Our three main principles are to stand on commerce, collaboration, and community. And anything that we can put into those three buckets of values is where we tend to make our stands, and have done so for the most part pretty successfully. As you said, we are from a pretty blue portion of the state, but what I would say is that while that may be the case, it is a more moderate blue portion of the state. And I think we've seen that here most recently with our local legislators and their commitment to stand their ground in some of the hardest battles that we've been fighting. And in particular, I know one that will come to mind for both you and I, Paul, is the paid family and medical leave bills, which have come up in the last 2 years. And I firmly believe that had it not been for the efforts of our chamber and our members who visited Santa Fe with us in such strong numbers, and certainly not without the help of our legislative body, uh, both on the Senate and on the House side, with Patty Lundstrom and George Munoz and Wanda Johnson um, standing firm against those bills. Harry Garcia, when he was obviously on the House side as well, standing firm against those things that we probably would have seen that bill pass. And so really appreciative of what we have here in Gallup and McKinley County in terms of our legislative body.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk in more depth about some of those issues and some of the ways, obviously you have some very powerful members of the legislature, some relative moderates, as you say, but talk a little bit, kind of lay the groundwork for us. Gallup McKinley, Gallup, of course, being out to the west. I know it as the last town you hit before you go to the Arizona state line off I-40. But talk just about the evolution of that area. What drives the economy of Gallup? It is a impoverished area for sure relative to the nation. Even the state of New Mexico, it's got some challenges, but how did it get to that point? What has it always been kind of a relatively lower income community, or were there some changes economically that caused that situation to develop?
Well, I think what you see here is a unique area and a unique portion of the state. Certainly, um, we are, for all intents and purposes, a border community, right? We're not talking about just the Arizona and Colorado borders, which are relatively close to us, but we're talking about the borders of the Navajo Nation, Zuni, Pueblo, those two in particular. And then, of course, outlying, we've got Laguna and Acoma Pueblos as well, the Hopi, also out to the west of us in Arizona. So we have a really diverse culture here. Gallup was founded on two things really back in the 1800s, and those two things were coal mining and then also the railroad. And in fact, Gallup gets its name from the railroad. The paymaster way back in the day, his last name was Gallup. David Gallup was his name. And so when you went to get paid, you went to Gallup, and that became the name of the community.
Well, that
Um,
I learned that's some trivia right there. I just learned some new information. So thank you for that, Bill.
yeah, there you go. And so Gallup has always been, in addition to those two industries, has always been uh, more of a trade area as well from a retail standpoint. There hasn't always been a lot of industry here. Certainly out on the eastern side of the county, there was the Tri-State Electric and Pruitt Power Plant, if you will. There was the Marathon Gas Refinery. Both of those have ceased operation here in recent years. We still have Lee Ranch Coal Mine, which operates at a much reduced level, and then we have Peabody Coal, which was on Navajo Nation land as well, that provided a lot of jobs. And the railroad has changed as well, moving many of its services further to the west and into Arizona for a number of reasons. But those two things do still remain. Some coal mining, and of course, the railroad is still fairly active here with Burlington Northern Santa Fe.
But real
And
quick, the railroad, when you're talking about a lot of railroad communities around New Mexico and elsewhere, they were built up at a time when the railroads had, steam engines and had to stop for water and refurbishment every 100 or 150 miles or so. I'm not a railroad guy, especially not a steam engine guy, but the impact on a lot of these communities from the railroads really was around servicing those trains, and that was a much more lucrative enterprise under that
Sure.
prior model.
Well, and we still have a rather large yard here for transitioning cars and offloading cars and doing that sort of thing. And so there's still quite a bit of business here in terms of the BNSF Railroad, but it has certainly changed over the years. We still see, Paul, probably anywhere from 100 to 130 trains a day through Gallup.
Oh
So
yeah, it's busy.
we're, we're right there on the main line. And our Chamber of Commerce building, in fact, sits right next to the train tracks. So you may hear BNSF roll by with the whistles blowing here during our podcast, but every time one of those goes by, I say, well, that's commerce. That's happening. And we love it. But beyond those two really founding industries here in Gallup and McKinley County, it's always been about being a trade center, a retail trade center for the different reservations and pueblos that surround us. And so when you look at Gallup, we are a population that is about roughly, give or take, 20,000 people proper in the city of Gallup. But we serve a trade area of probably 110, 120,000. And so it is not uncommon, especially on weekends and during paydays, that we'll see the population of Gallup go from 20,000 to upwards of 80 to 90,000 people in town at any given time. And so it's a real trade center. That always is a stretch on our infrastructure and what we can provide. The city and the county have worked for years to try to bolster and improve that infrastructure based on the large number of people we see come into town to do their trading, to do their business, right? Buy groceries, hardware supplies, all of those things. So really a thriving retail community that relies very much to this day on small businesses. Now, we do have the larger chains. We have a Home Depot and we have a Walmart certainly here in our community, but by and large, it's still the big retail pieces in our community, the what would be considered small businesses, even though they're employing anywhere from 70 to 100 people at a time. Those are the businesses that really the Gallup McKinley County area relies on for its tax base. The other piece is that we are very small when it comes to that tax base. For instance, for McKinley County, only 20% of the land mass in McKinley County is taxable. Now think about that. We're one of the largest counties in terms of land mass in the state, but only 20% of our property is taxable because of the reservation and pueblo lands. And so what the county and the city have to do on just a 20% tax base is pretty remarkable. And so when you ask about, has it always been this way we talk about the poverty, I think that continues to exist. We still have, right outside the city limits, we have folks who are living on the Navajo reservation who still have a very poor dirt road to get to their home. Some of them still don't have electricity. Most of them don't have water. And so they're hauling water. They don't have electricity, and we're talking about poor roads. And that's always been a battle, even in our mind, between the two different sides of the fence, right? The Navajo Nation and the county. The county would love to do more work when it comes to roads and improving infrastructure out in the county, but so many times it's thwarted by the bureaucracy that comes along with the BIA and with the Navajo Nation in terms of right of way and what can be done, because you can't get into um, a sovereign nation's right to control their property and the rights of way. And so it becomes a pretty entangled mess, not only there, but also from a law enforcement standpoint. So these are battles that have been going on for years and years and years. We continue to try to advocate, especially from the chamber side, that these communities, these governments come together for the betterment of all people and all the citizens. But it remains a struggle. And I think what you also find is that, you know, there is a lot of government money here in Gallup, whether it's Social Security payments or tribal payments, those kinds of things. That money flows in and gets spent in our community from a trade center, and then you know those folks who are reliant on that tend to wait until the next cycle of payment and then come back to town. And so it's kind of a vicious cycle that is somewhat hard to break. And I think that kind of covers where we are, Paul.
Yeah, definitely some economic challenges. And of course, in Santa Fe these days, as you mentioned earlier with the paid family leave bill, uh, we're fighting still to kind of mitigate against harm done out of Santa Fe to not just Gallup, but everybody around the state and small businesses in particular. But that was obviously a huge issue. Kind of where do you see things heading as you appraise Santa Fe and not just paid family leave this year, but kind of survey the last several years? Maybe you could say the MLG administration. Are they doing things that are improving the Gallup economy and leading to more prosperity, more investment, or do you see things sliding the other direction?
But it's a great question, Paul, and I think you and I have certainly had conversations offline many times about where we are as a state and what the impact is, not only in Gallup, McKinley County, but across our state. And I think what we've seen is a huge transition more toward the progressive side of things, and the maybe the a farther left leaning than we've seen in probably the last decade, over the last few years. And I think that has been a real issue that we've all had to battle. It's always been kind of our stand here, that if you get two sides to come to the table and one leaves a little angry and the other leaves a little angry, but you come to a decision that's somewhere in the middle, and maybe everybody didn't get everything they wanted, you probably did the right thing. And that middle ground seems to be evaporating across our state. And while I applaud some of the things that the MLG administration has done, and in fact, we were in favor of many of her tax bills, or not her tax bills, but her crime bills this past session. We saw great value in some of those. We have, by and large, not been on many of the same pages. I was pleased when the governor did veto the massive tax bill that came out of this last legislative session. I thought that was a real surprise to see that tax bill go down with her veto, but applauded that. And I think, what we have to realize is that when we talk about things like paid family and medical leave, and we talk about maybe a minimum wage increase again, I think that's probably on the horizon this next legislative session as well. When we see those things, it's not that we're necessarily against them. It's that we're against the way these bills are written and the devastating impact that they will have not only on small businesses, but on individuals across our state. And I don't think the legislative body really takes into full account what happens when you take a bill like the paid family and medical leave and start taxing people with the largest tax increase in New Mexico's history, and you're pulling more money out of their pocket at a time when we know our state has been flush over the last several years. When you take something like the the minimum wage increase talk that's done, and it all sounds good, and in my opinion, often done just for reelection purposes. But um, it sounds good until you start explaining to people that, hey, the money that you might be making up on one end is going to come out of the other end, and you really aren't going to make any ground up here. And I think our legislators have a tendency to feed into these policy ideas that are really not very sound when it comes to shoring up our state and really helping out rural New Mexico, or for that matter, anybody in New Mexico.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's challenging for all businesses in New Mexico, especially when you think you should be getting some tax reduction, some benefits from all the oil and gas money that's been flowing into our state and the budgets, et cetera. And instead, uh, like you mentioned, the tax bill would have been a tax increase. And I know you have some unique issues with alcohol in your area of the state, but it would have been a significant increase. Originally, it was going to be a very major increase in alcohol taxes, and then the governor, rightly, I think, agreeing with you, vetoed that tax bill, which was really a mess.
Yeah,
But
and what I can say to that, Paul, is, I mean, you don't have to look any further than Gallup McKinley County to know that increasing tax on liquor doesn't work. We are already in Gallup McKinley County the highest taxed um, in the state when it comes to alcohol. We have our own liquor excise tax that was imposed years ago, and it's an additional 6%. Now, has that additional 6% on alcohol curbed our problem? No. And in fact, what we know is that the higher the alcohol price goes, the more people are driven from alcohol into harder substances and illicit drugs. And we've seen that happen in our community. Um, Anything from crack cocaine to meth to now heroin and any of the opioids that are really destructive. Fentanyl, of course, all of that becomes more affordable, right? When you can go out on the street and buy fentanyl for $5 a pill versus having to go spend maybe two or three times that much on a six-pack of beer or a bottle of booze, we know that increasing the tax doesn't work, increasing the price doesn't work, and we testified to that end on both of those bills that we're going to increase taxes on alcohol. And I'm really disappointed that Senator Pinto was one of the advocates for that, and she knows or should know that it simply doesn't work. I mean, and we're proof of that here in Gallup and McKinley County.
yeah, speaking of the political situation with Gallup McKinley, we mentioned it's a relatively blue area of the state, but those some of those individuals, and I'll specifically point to George Munoz, Senate Finance Committee Chair, and Patty Lundstrom, who uh, is in the House. Those two are particularly important members of the legislature, especially from the perspective of those like us trying to keep a lid on some of the crazier ideas coming out of the legislature in Santa Fe. And on one hand, I guess it empowers you and your colleagues there in Gallup and McKinley counties, or two of the McKinley County, are some of the more powerful people in the state outside of the governor, but it also puts you under the microscope or puts some pressure on you there, Bill, to get uh, those ducks lined up in a row. Talk about the importance of those two or any other members of your delegation out there from your part of the state.
Well, I think what we have is a great deal of experience between both of them. What I will say is that they don't always see eye to eye, and I don't know that that's necessarily good or bad in any situation, but it's always um, good to have both of them on the side of business. I will say that both Senator Munoz and Representative Patty Lundstrom have always been pretty good to listen to their constituents in the business community. Of course, Senator Munoz is a businessman himself. Um, Representative Lundstrom is in her day job an economic development director. So they both kind of get how the private sector needs to work and understand that sometimes government needs to get out of the way. And I think they do a really good job of that. I'd also like to give um, uh, a great deal of credit to Representative Wanda Johnson, who for the most part stands firm with businesses as well, and has done so by voting with us on a number of issues. And also the newest member of our legislative team, which is Representative Garcia, who stepped in and took the place of the late Representative Alcone. She was good as well this year as a freshman representative. But Patty and George certainly have that experience and that, I guess, recognition and leadership in both the House and Senate that I think helps to benefit Gallup and McKinley County. But I also think that their moderate approach to things also benefits our state by interjecting those alternative ideas and thoughts to some of the more progressive ideas that are out there. And I appreciate their thoughtfulness in all of those matters. When it comes to things like the paid family and medical leave, I don't know, Paul, if you'd ever seen anything like that done this last legislative session when Senator Munoz called an informational meeting for Senate Finance to get just the information relayed to the committee members what was really in this bill without having to take action. It was just an informational meeting. I'd never seen anything like that, and I applaud real thinking out of the box on the senator's part to put that together in his committee so that people would really understand what was in the bill. Because I think some of these bills get so large and so in depth and there are so many, as you and I both know, throughout the course of a legislative session, that they simply do not have time to really digest and really understand all the meat that's inside these things. And so I really appreciated that outside of the box thinking and his approach. I think um, I think we're lucky to have them for Gallup and McKinley County, and I think we're lucky to have them in our state, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that was critical. That meeting was to the Senate Finance Committee, of course, being the green eye shade folks in Santa Fe in the legislature who focus on the bottom line and the dollars and cents and the financial stability of government at all levels. Something that I don't think, from my experience, was really done within the broader scope of the paid family leave bill, and especially since it was dramatically amended midway through the process. And I thought Senator Munoz was absolutely correct to have that meeting at which it was not so much a discussion between the political leaders on that particular issue, but the staffers who were talking about some of just the calculations and the considerations being made in terms of is paid family leave going to become a much bigger burden on the taxpayers because of some of the funds that people are going to have access to and the right to uh, you remember the welcome baby component of that whole legislation. So, um, yeah, we could go on and on about paid family leave, and that was absolutely a critical victory. But I think in the last several minutes that we have left, uh, I've talked and we've talked in detail personally, one to one about the infrastructure issues and the condition of I-40 and the
Oh my
need
goodness.
to rework the interchanges there at Gallup on I-40, and just the peril that everybody who drives that road faces. And then you go into Arizona and things generally are much, much better. And there's been several reports recently that have come out highlighting that New Mexico's infrastructure and roads are woefully in disrepair, and how we really need to improve that. Well, in many ways, Gallup is kind of the centerpiece of that, because I-40 is such a critical east-west route for not just people on their summer vacations, but for the trucking industry and people shifting and moving freight throughout this country. So uh, I know you're involved in that, but why don't you talk about the problem and some of the things that we're trying to get done here?
Yeah, so there is a great deal of talk about our interchanges and redoing some of that. We've been part of that conversation and will continue to be part of it. There is a dramatic need, Paul, for that stretch of I-40, and I'm sure you're aware. A study after study has now confirmed that from the Arizona state line to Albuquerque is now the most dangerous section of I-40 in the nation. Think about that for a minute. The most dangerous section of an interstate that runs pretty much coast to coast is
Yeah, it goes
in,
all the way to North Carolina. I know that, and pretty much, I don't think it hits the coast, but it comes very close
yeah, it
out in
gets very
California.
close.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to do something. Um, I think I-40 has to be 3 lanes. When you look at the number of truck traffic, the number of heavy semi truck traffic that is up and down that interstate, we have to find a way to better accommodate um, the numbers of trucks that are traveling that interstate, and that's only going to increase. Um, and I think we have to look at the road itself, and how do we build a better road that doesn't deteriorate, 2 years after it's been resurfaced. Um, that construction between here and Albuquerque is ongoing every year. I mean, it's just amazing how much construction is on it. And then you look at um, what I consider to be a pretty good indicator of how bad the road is. I started last year, Paul, my own kind of survey, driving back and forth to Santa Fe during the legislative session. I spent a great deal of time on that stretch of I-40 between Gallup and Albuquerque, and then jumping onto I-25. And I started a survey, my own survey, called the guardrail count, right? How many guardrails had been taken out between here and Albuquerque? It's a 120-mile stretch. And never did I have less or fewer than 50 guardrails that had been taken out between Gallup and Albuquerque. Now you think about that, that's a lot of guardrail being taken out by accidents on Interstate 40. And then you can start to look at the fatalities that are racked up between here and Albuquerque, and that also should play a part in things. You're right, we have to do better. We have to have better infrastructure. I think a few years back, Paul, if you'll recall, the legislature took under consideration a new tax that would have gone to NMDOT to improve our roads and infrastructure. And we were very supportive of seeing that tax increase until the legislators themselves amended the bill and said, no, the tax would not go to NMDOT, that it would go to the general fund, and then that they would then distribute it. Once they said it went to the general fund, we were out. We couldn't support that. We
Right.
need to be targeted with what we're going to do with tax dollars. And in that sense, we were all on board. You know, if you want to raise the tax and it goes specifically to that road infrastructure, we're going to be supportive of that. But to just throw it into the general fund, to have the legislature be um, able to tap into that dollar when it shouldn't be able to, did not sit well with us. And so we've got to be very focused on this. We need our legislators to be focused, that when you increase a tax, that it goes to the purpose for which it was intended and nothing else.
Yeah. Well, I know you've talked positively about Senator George Munoz, and my goal here is not to denigrate him or his work, but uh, he is the head of the Senate Finance Committee. We
Right?
are a state sitting on $61 billion. We know that there are serious issues, and this one is one that I know politics in New Mexico can be pretty provincial when it comes to, well, is the highway in my district getting done, or what are we doing for my specific area? But uh, you would have to think that he would have a strong incentive to want to improve upon this particular situation. Have you had conversations with Senator Munoz and, to an extent, Lundstrom and Wanda Johnson and others, or where do you see this whole thing heading with regard to at least I-40?
Yes. So that answer is yes. We've talked with all of our legislators about it. All of them realize that there is a real need here. And in particular, Senator Munoz, he and I have had some lengthy conversations about improving that infrastructure, especially I-40. He has real concerns about how it's being handled and what's being done. Um, but I don't know that, as you said, there are those factions, right, that say, well, if you're going to do it in Gallup, McKinley County, you better do it over here, and right, and then all the money begins to get spread out, and then you're not accomplishing much. But I do think you're right with the billions that we have in excess right now, Paul. This needs to be a major focus, and we'll continue to lean on not only Senator Munoz and Representative Lundstrom, but all of the legislators to try and get something done that makes sense from an infrastructure standpoint across our state, and not just to Gallup, McKinley County, because um, we are so reliant on roads here in New Mexico, right? It's critical to our commerce, to our communities, and to whether or not we thrive or die. And we need real help there, and not just in roads, but in water infrastructure as well. That is a key and critical issue in our community. We've got to improve that, and we've got to see money go to those projects that will improve the lives of every New Mexican.
Yeah. Well said. Well, Bill, I think we're going to have to wrap things up here. I know you're not going to be leading the chamber for much longer. I don't know if when you have a retirement date, but will we see you at all up in Santa Fe during the upcoming 30-day session, or are you going to be on a beach in Tahiti somewhere?
I know I love New Mexico, Paul, and I might take a vacation to Tahiti, but I will tell you this: I still plan on being very active in our chamber. I will be retiring at the end of the year. December 31st is my mark, and but I do have an extended personal contract with the chamber, so to do some continued advocacy work for them up in Santa Fe on issues that will impact commerce and impact business in our state. And so I look forward to continuing my work up there, and continuing to work with great partners like the Rio Grande Foundation and especially you as a good friend, um, not only as a partner, but certainly as an ally, and as I said, as a good friend. It's always great to be with you, Paul.
Well, thanks, Bill, and we'll certainly miss you. But how do people find you or the Gallup McKinley Chamber of Commerce?
So on the web, on the World Wide Web, there you can get in touch with us at the gallupchamber.com. It's like the university, right? It's the gallupchamber.com.
All right. Well, hopefully I'll see you in August at your event over there, and I'm sure we'll probably bump into each other in Santa Fe, even in the abbreviated 30-day session. But regardless, hope you enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll see you soon. So thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.